I actually arrived in Toronto in the early 70s, and it was exciting. Feminism was really starting to take hold. People were starting to give women a chance, and we were seizing it.
Feminism really influenced the fact that I thought that I could be a broadcast journalist. But we started to ask questions that the guys weren't asking. We would cover issues that we became aware of, and domestic violence was one of them.
Women were starting to speak up. They weren't as submissive, but a lot of men did not like that. There was a lot of pushback.
I was volunteering at a women's organizing center, and I put a sign on our bulletin board saying, anyone interested in coming to help start a women's shelter, or a shelter for women and children, come to a meeting. And 10 women showed up, and we decided that night that we were going to start a shelter. We were unreasonably confident that we could do it. So this was Interval House's first home, and we rented it for $600 a month, I think. And there was lots of room.
The women who started Interval House started it because women were unsafe. They were being beaten, abused, and killed in their own homes. They brought in mattresses in this empty house, and women slept there because they just couldn't go home. You have to remember, in those days, nobody knew what it was for. It was like we were creating something brand new.
When Interval House opened up, the headlines were that they were sheltering runaway wives. The idea was that they were interfering in the marriage and that they had no right to be there. It really was difficult to get respect for this issue.
1 in 10 husbands beat their wives regularly, and these women, I don't think this is a very much of a laughing matter, Madam Speaker.
Nobody was going to help you. You weren't really seen as a cause. You were seen as a disruptor.
After Spadina Road, we moved to 596 Huron Street, and we rented it first, and then we were able to buy it with a grant from CMHC. And that was amazing because it meant that we were here to stay.
And we actually had gun threats at the door. We had someone throw rocks through our window. We had women who worked at the shelter followed home. We built a fortress against society. We felt nothing outside was going to help us protect women, that we had to do it ourselves.
It was hard enough to get funding for an organization like Interval House, but to have widespread budget cuts that affected everybody made it nearly impossible.
As the years went by, any kind of more permanent government funding wasn't emerging, and we realized we had to try and raise money ourselves. It just opened the doors to the idea of how do you talk to people in the public to get them to understand your issue and then want to contribute.
Hello, I'm Linda Sims at Interval House, Canada's first and oldest shelter for abused women and their children.
So in an effort to reach more people and tell our story to a wider audience, we started this direct response television program called Journey to Freedom.
The stories you are about to hear are true.
We were doing reenactments, but of stories of actual women. And it was interesting because a lot of the stations refused to run it because it was too violent. So they'll run some slicer dicer movie, and that's fine. But when you're talking about real women and the real stories of violence, they're like, nah, we can't really show that to the Canadian public.
It raised so much awareness, it raised a lot of funds, it brought Interval House's profile and the issue of abuse into people's living rooms, into their private space.
Finally, there was a recognition that this was happening, that this shouldn't happen, and that there should be resources to do something about it.
The shelter can only do so much. We wanted to keep women safe, but we also wanted to help women reestablish their lives and become independent.
So there's always a different shift in what the women need. And in order to address that, we have to come up with innovative new programming to address those gaps. So we are always researching, we are talking to community partners, other agencies, and most importantly, we're talking to the women and we're asking them, what do you need from us?
How can we empower them to break their cycle of violence for themselves and for their families and stand on their own?
But we were pretty well bursting at the seams. We couldn't fit any more women in, so we decided to do a capital campaign to buy and build a new shelter.
Interval House had been entrepreneurial from the very start, with an entrepreneurial mindset. There isn't a financial return, but there's a social return, there's an emotional return, there's a human capital return. And that's the way I pitched it. Like, this is the best investment you'll ever make.
We met Michael and he agreed to become the chair of the capital campaign, to the point where he could tell the story of Interval House better than I could.
Having gone through the building that was in the annex and the vision for the new building and how much of an expanded program that could offer, we all got behind that.
Michael and David Young and John and Nancy Love are the kind of people that really helped Interval House build capacity and step up to the next level.
Looking back, it's remarkable what Interval House has done, what the journey has been like, how courageous and persistent that group has been. But there is just so much more to do. We saw that in COVID. It was so disheartening to see the violence just surge up again.
You know, I look at this now as someone who has been very public now about her own story of intimate partner violence. And I think a lot has changed. At the same time, it's distressing to see how many people still need help.
Over the last 50 years, Interval House has been a leader, an innovator, a challenger, a disruptor. But the bottom line work of Interval House is to support women and children to break the cycle of violence, to make their lives better and safer.
It's just a matter of looking at the world around you and noticing the things that don't seem right, and realizing sometimes that, you know what, I'm the person that could do something about that. And I know other people who care about this too. And that's how change happens. Interval House, the first formal shelter in Canada for abused women and their children, opened its doors on April the 1st, 1973, in a nearby house on Spadina Road. Over the years, Interval House has helped thousands of women achieve safety and self-sufficiency. Today, hundreds of shelters across the country provide safe haven for women fleeing intimate partner violence with their children.
Interval House is the largest and most impactful women's shelter in the country. When we set out to create the Rolla Page Shelter Foundation, we knew we had to have the advice and counsel from Interval House to make it work. And they have done that.
Interval House really reflects what we have been trying to convey, in the sense that shelters are much more than a bed. And these programs are incredibly well executed. They have a depth to them. And these are just so important in terms of women being able to build new lives after the violence that they have overcome.
When you look at the lives that are changed, how people are put back together and through different programs and supports, it really is just beyond words sometimes to express just how vital this organization is and how many people it supports and the invaluable work it does each and every day. So for our organization at FRPO, we really wanted to be part of that.
This work is not easy. It takes commitment, it takes dedication, it takes resilience, more than we know. And so I'd like to just thank Interval House board members, volunteers, staff, leaders for continuing to support women and their children over the past 50 years.